Welcome to Satsang. What a beautiful joy it is to be together. And welcome also, of course, to our family joining us from all over the world. Even though you're not here physically with us, we feel you, we know you're here, and welcome to all of you as well. And as always, we begin with one of the questions that does come in from our global family who aren't able to be here physically, but send in the questions streaming as the satsang is streaming online. So we always begin by taking one of those to honor them. How would you describe freedom? Freedom is the ability, quite literally, to be free. It's not some very esoteric, complex, sophisticated concept. Freedom means the ability to be free. The question that we ask ourselves, though, is, why aren't we free? What is it that's keeping us from freedom? Most of us in this room, watching online, live in societies and countries where we are free. We're free to vote how we want. We're free to shop how we want, to eat how we want, to live how we want, to pray and worship how we want, or not to pray or worship at all. We've got really, I would imagine for the vast majority of us joining in satsang, we've got full freedom. And yet, we're stuck. But we're stuck not because of an oppressive government regime, not by colonizers, not because we're locked up in a jail cell, not because we are someone's purchased property as a slave or an indentured servant. But we're stuck because of our own mind. We're stuck because of the ways that our own mind works. So let's say right now, who would like in this moment to be very, very, very happy? Okay? Raise your hand if in this moment you would like to be very, very, very happy, right? Of course, why not? Now the question becomes, that's pretty much our answer all the time. I can't think of any moment that you would say, no, I'd rather not be happy now. And yet, how much of our lives do we really spend happy? Sadly, a very small percentage. Because our minds have made us stuck. We've decided that other people's words, other people's language, what they say to us, what they do, how they treat us, how they live, is something worthwhile to give over my happiness to. I was in a great mood, and then you came home. Right? It was such a good day, why did you have to talk to me? Or, everything was great until you did this. Or until you said that. It's your fault. Well, they certainly may have said or done something wrong or hurtful. But that idea that I no longer can be in a good mood, that I no longer can be really happy because of something someone else said or did, is a conscious decision I've made. The idea that how other people are living, speaking, treating me is worthy of my happiness, my joy, my peace. That's the workings of my own mind. Our minds have become our jailers. Our minds have said, until this happens, I won't be happy. I've shared before the study that I did, true story, scientific study that I did after I'd been in India maybe a year, maybe a year and a half or so. And I was already seeing the incredible joy in people who had nothing. I mean, people who lived so far below Western standards of poverty. And yet they were so blissful, so happy. And I was starting to have some clarity on actually what it was, what that secret to happiness was. But I'm an academic by heart, I'm a scientist by heart, and I thought, let me do a study. So when I was back in America, I actually spoke with about 7-10 friends I know, people I know quite well. One of whom was the CEO of a big Fortune 500 multi-billion-dollar company. One was a tenured professor at Stanford. One was a successful actress in Hollywood. One was someone who, a famous singer, had songs in the top 10 on the radio. Someone was a professional basketball player. And as I chatted with all of them, because of course I didn't tell them, hey, I'm doing a study and you're a subject, I just was talking to them. In the midst of talking, I asked them one question. Are you happy? And every single one of them gave me one of two answers. Either they said, I will be happy when, and that blank was different for different people. The kids finally grow up and move out of the house. I get the raise that I've always wanted. I can finally retire. My husband retires. My wife retires. I lose the weight I gained over the holidays. Whatever it might be. But I will be happy when. Or I would be happy if. Again, the fill in the blanks differed. Husband would work less, wife would work less, there was less traffic on the freeway, my boss was nicer, my employees were more obedient, I could zip up the skirt that I want to wear, whatever it was. But these people who had reached the absolute height were still one thing away from happiness, meaning they weren't free. Meaning that their job or their spouse's job, the other cars on the freeway, their weight, whether their kids cleaned up the room or didn't clean up the room, was their jail cell. That was what kept them unhappy. That was the one thing they needed in order to be happy. Meaning they're not free. And yet these people had attained what everyone else is killing themselves to achieve. So freedom is the ability in every moment, regardless of what's happening around us. Regardless of the traffic, regardless of the people, what they're saying or doing. Regardless of my weight or skin color or a pimple on my nose, to actually be happy, to be in peace, regardless of what I have, what I've achieved, what I've acquired. It's like in the Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavan Krishna spoke about the yogi being the one who's the same in success and failure, right? In pleasure and pain, in gain and in loss. Not that the yogi is dull and doesn't understand the difference between gain and loss or success and failure. but just that it didn't impact him or her. That they're not living on the surface of the ocean with the waves that go up and down. I mean, imagine that you were chained, if you could, to the wave, to the surface of the water. Well, as that wave went up and down, you go up and down. Now imagine that you could be unchained, and you could actually dive deeply into the ocean, to a place where there are no waves. That's freedom. And that's the freedom that counts. When we talk about moksha, a lot of times people think it means, oh, after I die, I will get moksha. But that implies that the body is the problem. That if I'm just free of this body, I will be closer to moksha. Well, ask amputees if they feel closer to moksha with each limb that's been cut off. I've never heard that. Never heard that people who have had limbs cut off feel, well, I've at least done with a quarter of the body. I should be 25% free, right? If the body were the problem. Of course not. The body's not the problem. The mind is the problem. The body is beautiful. The body is this incredible gift we've been given. It's the mind that keeps us stuck. So freedom is freedom not from the body, but freedom in the body, from the nonsense of the mind. If anyone here has a question, I would be happy to take it. Yes. And he'll just give you the microphone. Then all of those joining in online can hear you.
Namaskaram, Swati. Why do we suffer?
Beautiful. Why do we suffer? So, according to the Buddhist tradition, suffering is, you could say, the fundamental truth. Human life, as we know it, is suffering. So in that case, if we look at it from that perspective, we suffer because we are humans who are not enlightened. Very simple. But I would take it a step to the side, and I would say suffering is an emotional response to the pain that we feel. Could be physical pain. Have you seen what happens when kids fall and cut themselves? It's very interesting. Children play in the road or outside. They trip and fall, or they fall off the bike. Leg is bleeding. They look around, no one's there. Right? They walk into the house. The minute they get into the house, they start crying. Right? Very interesting. If it were simply the pain from the leg, they would have started to bawl right there in the road. But they actually, very frequently, when it's not a massively horrible accident, they start to cry the minute that they are in eyesight, ear sight of someone who's going to come give them a big hug and pick them up and take care of them. Now, the pain is in the knee. The suffering is emotional. In the case of the kids, it's probably fear. Must have been scary to fall off the bike or to fall down. Scary to see your blood. That's the emotional component. And they're separate. Pain started the moment I fell down. But the suffering only started the minute I went inside. And if no one was home, the kid will wait till mom gets home and then starts to cry. See it all the time. Right? True, no? Yes. So, pain is different, suffering is different. Now, on a deeper level, that pain may not be a skinned knee. That pain may be the pain of loss, the pain of failure, pain that I'm experiencing in my mind due to what is happening around me. That pain becomes then synonymous with suffering. If it's in the mind, it's suffering. It's my emotional response to what is happening. Pain is inevitable. Pain is of the body. We can measure pain. We can give you medicine to make you have less pain. Because there's a chemical process to pain. But suffering is a choice. And I don't mean it's always a conscious choice. I don't mean that you've chosen to suffer in any sort of conscious way. But we do absolutely have the ability to no longer suffer. But in order to no longer suffer, we have to not put, this goes back to the first question, we have to not put our joy, our peace, in the up and down, unpredictable nature of the world. If every time something I want to happen doesn't happen, I suffer. Well, that's because I've put my happiness, I've hooked it into the weather, the stock market, the traffic, other people's moods. Right? Someone is obnoxious to us, rude to us. We suffer. So I've said, okay, I'm going to hook my happiness into your moods. So we say that suffering is caused by ignorance. That on the deepest level, core of who we are is divinity. Right? We've been created not just by the Creator, but of the Creator. The core of who we are is divine. The Upanishads remind us of that when we chant Isha Vasyamidam Sarvam Yat Kincha Jagatyam Jagat. Everything in the universe is pervaded by the divine, including us. It doesn't say everything in the universe except you is divine. That's the core truth of who we are. It's why we chant these mantras. Soham, aham brahmasmi. Right? We always remind ourselves that core of who we are is divine. But then in ignorance, we identify as the body. I am my height, my weight, my history, my career, my bank account, the color of my skin, my relationships, where I've reached on professional ladders, social ladders, popularity ladders. We identify as that. If we say to people, who are you? You're going to get name, age, place of birth, race, religion. I'm so-and-so's husband or wife or mother or father or son or daughter. You're going to get the career. But that's not who you are. Who you are is divine. All of the rest is just describing your vehicle. Right? Like I'm the 1971 California female model. It's not who I am. It's the particular model I've come in. Then you could say, 1971 California model, but that's now being, driven in India. It's the vehicle. It's not who I am. But if I identify as that, there's suffering. That's where greed, lust, anger, fear, attachment, expectation, competition, jealousy, all of that which actually causes our suffering is rooted in ignorance. Because I identify as the body, as the roles, I'm constantly comparing, usually unfavorably. This one is more beautiful than I am. This one is richer than I am. This one is smarter than I am. This one's more successful than I am. This one's funnier than I am. And I suffer. So when we live in that original ignorance, right? We don't think about original sin. We think about original ignorance. We identify ignorantly as the body rather than soul, as the container rather than the content. We suffer. And therefore the answer to suffering is wisdom, truth. It's not about finally getting that raise or finally getting that promotion. Finally getting what you want. Because after each thing, it's something else. And when we speak about sort of the nature of life is suffering, well, we love, we lose. It's the nature of life. Eventually, everybody's going to get sick at some point. Everybody's going to die at some point. If that leads to suffering, it's based on that ignorance. It means I am the body. That person is the body. The relationship, the attachment is just body to body. So the suffering is rooted in ignorance. However, that doesn't mean that you should feel badly about it. The solution is not to say to yourself, you are ignorant. Now you've just added criticism onto already suffering. Right? Berating yourself never helps. Condemning, criticizing, it never helps. So that's where compassion is so important. To really have compassion for that, to see that suffering. I'm really suffering there. And to hold that suffering with love, with compassion. Because yes, you're divine, and you're here in this beautiful form. And this form isn't who you are, but it's still worthy of our love and our compassion. We're not meant to just push away the body, push away our humanity. We're meant to live through it, to fulfill our dharma, to serve, to do our duty, to be engaged. Well, all of that is part of this body, this role, this history, these resources. So have compassion for that body, mind, heart, emotion complex, you can think of it. Have compassion for it. And in that compassion, hold your own suffering with love. But also simultaneously, Make sure you're engaged in practices, meditative practices, prayer practices, that allow you to witness and realize, I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, I'm not the suffering. Because here I am watching it. Here I am aware that I am suffering. It means I'm not the one suffering. If I'm the one aware of the suffering, then I'm not the one suffering. So if you can practice that meditation of being aware of the suffering, then it'll help you hold it with love and compassion, tenderness, and it'll help you realize you are not it, because you're watching it. And the one who's watching isn't suffering. The one who's watching is just aware. Okay. Beautiful. Yes, of course. We'll take this as our last question tonight.
Thank you, Mataji, for the wonderful opportunity to be in this satsang and to learn so much from you and this ashram in our spiritual journey. I think the people of this land are so fortunate to have Mother Ganga, for instance, all the sages, saints, rishis, through whom the religion has been very much alive and kicking.
Yes.
But today you have a situation world over, especially where you have our Indian diaspora in my own country. Also Delhi, all parts of India, where we see people, especially the young, drifting away from the Hindu Dharma, Hinduism, etc. From where you sit, what do you think we can do differently so that we can reverse some of these trends for the current and especially generations to come? Thank you.
Beautiful. So, this moving away from the culture, from the religion, from the Dharma, especially in the West, and also now in metropolitan India. Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly, yes. We see this in the West, we see it in metropolitan India. The youngsters moving away from Hinduism, moving away from the Dharma. I think one of the core reasons that I've seen, because we work with a lot of youth, I think it's actually a sociologic problem much more than it is a spiritual or religious problem. And here's how I understand it. Up until maybe 2 generations ago, maximum, maybe 3 in some places, but very, very recent, Hindu culture was rooted really in young people doing what their parents told them to do. There were no questions. It was not considered polite. You wouldn't, if your parents said do this, you wouldn't say why. Right? You would just do it. So the parents say pranam karo, pranam kiya. Parents say Bhagwan ko tilak laga diya. Parikrama karo, parikrama kiya. Right? This is how we do it. We sit, we chant, we pray. We're vegetarians, we act like this, we live like this. These are our social norms. Okay. And it's gone like that for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. What's happened very recently is that the Western educational system has entered India. And of course, in the diaspora, as you speak, the Indian Hindu children are in Western education, in Western schools. And of course, through social media and media, we've got more of that influence. Now, the influence is neither good nor bad. It's not a value judgment. But there's something very different about Western education than Indian education. We are taught and trained to be skeptical and to ask questions. And it's not considered rude. In my classes, if you didn't ask questions, you lost points. The child who sat silently in class and never spoke up was never the top student in the class. And inevitably, the teacher would call on them and say, what do you think about this? And if the child didn't have a great answer, the teacher was angry. If you didn't understand, why didn't you ask? And the flip side of it, interestingly, was the exams were so frequently based not just on right or wrong, but on your thought process. So you had to not only give an answer, but you had to support why you think that is the answer. Now, you have kids raised in school systems like that. They come home and they say to their parents, or the parents say, Pranam karo, tilak laga. And they say, why? Now, they're not being rude. They're not intending to be rude. But the parents who never asked their parents any questions think it's rude. And in many cases, the parents don't actually have the answer because they never asked. And so what they say to their children is, because I said so. Right? Now, you could say the mort of because I said so having any power is over. It's no longer a powerful time for because I said so. Nobody's buying it anymore. Youth today, they want answers. Not because they're rude, but because their brains have been educated and trained to ask questions, to be skeptical. Not in a negative way, not in a cynical way, but just not to believe everything they're told. So they come home, they say, why tilak? Or one of my favorites, why are we vegetarian? And the parents say things like, because the cow is holy. Now you take a child grown up in the West who's never seen a cow, right, other than on the side of a milk carton. Cow is holy? Well, I don't think the cow is holy. Okay, so then I'm going to eat meat. Now, the dilemma with that is that A, our children end up making bad decisions or wrong decisions, but B, there actually are reasons for all of these things that have nothing to do with because I said so, because the cow being holy. But there's actually, Hinduism is a very scientific religion. There are scientific bases behind everything we do. But because the older generation never actually asked the questions, they don't have the answers. So they're also a little bit taken aback. They don't want to admit to their kids, ki mujhe kuch pata hi nahi hai. So instead, they get angry. अरे तुम क्या समझते अपने आप को? जो मैं ही कह रहा हूँ वही कर दो. And the kids may do it, just because they want dinner. But they're not going to believe it. It's not going to change them. And the moment they become independent, they're going to say, "Okay, I don't want anything to do with this." The moving astray of a lot of the youth actually presents to me a really beautiful opportunity. It's a challenge, but it's an opportunity to us to become educated, to learn about our religion, to learn why we do things. And if you don't know, look it up online. I mean, like now you've got a way to find the answers. This is actually why Puja Swamiji started the whole Encyclopedia of Hinduism project back in the 1980s. Because living in America, Hindu kids would come home from school full of what the teacher had taught them about Hinduism. Their parents would say that's not true. But the parents didn't actually have any real legitimate, authentic sort of answer to give instead. There certainly was no book the kid could walk in and say, "See, it says." And so Puja Swamiji said, we need to fix this. And that's what actually began the whole 25-year yatra that culminated in this incredible 11-volume Encyclopedia of Hinduism. So the answers are there. But we, as the elders, need to not be worried about our own egos. We need to be prepared to say, I don't know the answer to that. But I am sure there's a very good answer for that. It's a very good question. I'm going to find out that answer and I'm going to tell it to you. And number one, that's going to make the children actually respect their parents a lot more, because children have got an amazing kind of BS meter. Like, they just know. They just know. And so when you're actually being honest with them, you get their respect much more than by saying, "Jo main kehta hoon wahi kar do." And then it gives us the opportunity to actually learn the answers. And what I've seen is that Hindu youth who actually learn about their culture are very beautifully pious, dedicated Hindus. But it's those who are raised where it's more the rituals than the depth. Those are the kids who are going to end up walking away from it. Because if there's nothing in the ritual, and it's just a ritual, this generation is looking for something a lot deeper, a lot more meaningful. They're asking a lot more questions, beautiful questions about their lives, about their purpose, about meaning. It's beautiful. And it gives us the opportunity to support them and for us to dive deeper and to learn more and to share. And then you'll find they will absolutely be there. I mean, so many people from all over the world are turning to the Vedas. People of every religion turning to the Vedas, to this tradition, for wisdom, for answers. So we have to be prepared to bow our ego a little bit, bend the ego, be humble, admit we don't necessarily know, and learn more, and learn together. And give it to them in a way that's deep rather than just rituals. Beautiful. Have a beautiful rest of your evening, beautiful night, and a very beautiful morning and day to all of our family joining us from all over the world. And so much love to all of you.